episode of Colubrid and Colubroid Radio. Zach here as always, and with me is Matt. How are you doing, Matt?
Oh, man. Recovering from this heat exhaustion of 100 plus degrees and the storm weather and everything else that took place this past week.
Yes.
But it's good to kind of kick back, and we got a good friend on tonight.
Yes. Tonight we have the one and only Justin Smith from the Herpetoculture Network and the Herpetoculture Podcast, Snakes and Stogies, Corn Stars. Did I forget any?
Chondrocast, I guess.
Chondrocast is in there as needed. So, and probably 4 to 5 more in the next couple years. So
who knows?
Yes.
I'm trying to not have the same workload that Burke does.
Yeah.
Like once Burke passed like the 6-show mark, I was like, no thanks.
Yeah.
Good.
No,
that's a lot.
So we are one of those 6 shows, obviously. And what's awesome about tonight's show, obviously, is it's I forget what we would call that. We have the 2 podcast networks for herpetoculture joined in one.
Crossover.
Yes, crossover. There we go. But before we get into our convo with Justin, we have our just kind of updates for Matt and I. So we recorded with Owen last episode, and then I promptly hopped in a van and went down to Kentucky and spent a week in the field chasing crawdads, which was pretty awesome. Got to visit about 50 different locations roughly. And what's kind of fun about doing that work is when you're bouncing down roads and vans for crayfish or passing beautiful herp habitat. So got to do some side herping, I guess is what we would call it, but picked up my 2022 copperhead. So put that one on the list for the year, and got some black, I guess it would be a gray rat snake now. We got some garter snakes and water snakes and all kinds of good stuff. So that was fun. And then when I got back from that trip, had a clutch of, I think it's pronounced Lahita, Sonoran gophers waiting for me, which is kind of awesome. This is my first year getting eggs from Pitchophis. And turns out that Pitchophis eggs are the same size as false water cobra eggs, so I'm totally prepared for them with the egg boxes and everything. And then other than that, today, Father's Day, so when I'm recording this, I got a second clutch out of one of my big falsies. So 14 more false water cobra eggs are in the incubator. At some point, this needs to come to an end, but, still fun. And I have my last clutch of the year should be damn it, Chris Painshab's going to kill me. Thorn scrub rats. There we go. If she's not gravid, she's the fattest thorn scrub rat snake in all of North America. So I'm waiting for that female to drop. And Chris gave me the pair last year. So thank you for that, bud. But that's really been it on my front. What's up with you, Matt?
Oh, man. It's been kind of crazy just in terms of generalized work schedule. Just like every place in the world, we're all running a little bit ragged and short. Mm-hmm. So I'm still short 2 people on my team. And on top of that, when you get back home, you're like, holy cow, I've got to dig for it right now. Mm-hmm. Like today, Father's Day, for instance, this morning, I was going through just like any keeper goes through their collection on a daily, if not multiple times during the week, checking on animals, and found a surprise clutch of leopard rat snakes.
Oh, nice.
Which is always cool. But it's always a little bit surprising with this particular locality. These were some animals that I purchased, and they're Croatian locale, but I've never seen them lock. I've never seen them ovulate. And the only cue I have really in terms of the animal going into, I would say, a laying cycle, not even a pre-lay or anything of that nature, is they just stop feeding. Which is interesting, too, because this locality in particular only eats for maybe like 3 or 4 months out of the whole entire year. And they just like go up and down, never lose weight. And then all of a sudden you're like, oh, there's eggs here. Cool. Which is cool. You can't, kind of conundrum off of it or negatively say anything off of it. I mean, it's just awesome to see that species in herpetoculture being produced, because there's not many people working with them anymore. That being even said, I mean, it's awesome to see, one of the people that has been on the show, Clint Bartley with Metazotics. I mean, he just opened up his shop. He's got everything kind of in play now. So it's really cool to see someone take it into a different aspect of the industry too, as well, and see someone kind of develop, a show or a show stopping location, if you will, just for herpetoculture and, kind of expanding into that aspect. So, but other than that, I mean, really right now it's just a time waiting aspect of just waiting for eggs to hatch.
Yeah. We're in that at school. It's weird. The only thing that's hatched so far for me are the first 2 clutches of false water cobras have hatched. One's already had 4 meals and they're all heading to forever homes. The second clutch just hatched last week. But you're right. We're in that weird, like 2 weeks before all hell breaks loose when all these eggs start hatching. And it always lulls me into a false sense of security, because I'm like, oh yeah, we're going to be fine. And then boom, babies. But when I say boom babies, I'm talking about maybe 200 babies. What is your baby count going to be?
Well, that's funny. I was talking to Kevin Sheehan, who does a lot of the scaleless Texas rats, a lot of different morphs of Texas. And he goes, man, I'm so excited. I have about like 50 or 60 Texas about to hatch. And I go, I have about 150 about to hatch.
Of just those?
So, of just Texas. So, I mean, it is a little bit of, it can be overwhelming, which is always one of those things of time management and kind of setting up everything appropriately. And maybe tonight we can go into some of that aspect of how keepers maybe set up things appropriately and how they pre-plan for keeping hatchlings appropriately before maybe they offer them for sale, give them to other potential keepers or other collectors, because maybe that might be something of interest in the hobby.
Yeah, no, totally. Today, speaking of time management, it's Father's Day, and my wife asked me, what do you want Colin and I to do for Father's Day for you? And I was like, well, Colin's going to be getting up at about 8, and we're going to overhaul the entire collection on Father's Day. So that's what I did today. My 13-year-old scrubbed a lot of tubs, a lot of glass, changed a lot of bedding. I've got maybe 30 naturalistic setups, and then I've got about 40 tubs here at the house. And yeah, with the time management, I kind of saw the field work schedule. Things weren't getting dingy. I've been able to keep up with it, but I just thought if I've got a day where I can have indentured servitude and it's allowed, I'm going to take it. We're going to basically clean our asses off today. So that's, I'm in a good spot, but yeah. And on that same token with Colin, I do want to thank you. You sent me, everybody get ready. I got a ball python from Matt. And that little ball python, it's got several genes in it, and I can't remember what they are. All I know is that my son loves it. For some reason, Colin really likes ball pythons. He's allowed to like ball pythons. I'll let him have that. He also has hognose snakes, so it ends up equaling out to 0. But anyway, he's got the balls, and thank you for that. He loves it. The little thing's already eaten like 3 times, so we're good to go on that. Yeah.
So you say that like a dad whose kid got a scholarship to Auburn when you're an Alabama fan.
Only a little bit. Only a little bit. I might have shown him a Nerodia, a false water cobra, a thorn scrub rat, one of the like bazillion king snakes here. I'm like, don't you like these? Yeah, but the ball pythons are cool. They sit and watch TV with me. I'm like, oh, okay. So I will say a king snake won't do that. You put a king snake on a couch, it's gone. So anyway, but different strokes for different folks. So there we go. I digress. Anyway, so anything else before we jump into this thing?
I think we jump in.
Let's jump in. All right, Justin. How's it going, man?
It's good.
Welcome to Colubrid and Colubroid Radio.
Really good.
Yes. So those of you who know and have listened to one of the many, many podcasts Justin is a part of know that Justin is, and I mean this in a good way because I am this way as well, what I would classify as a somewhat eclectic reptile keeper.
A man of taste.
A man of tastes. Several tastes. And one of those tastes recently, I would say, in the past couple of years, has definitely been colubrids. And one specific colubrid has been the foci of his efforts for quite some time, and that would be Bairds rat snakes. So what we're going to do for the first half of tonight's show is just kind of do a dedicated Baird eye conversation with Justin. Specifically, I love asking this question, so we'll just kind of jump right into it. When, where, and why did Baird rat snakes take your imagination as far as being a herpetoculturist? Like, what about them made you fixate on them the way that you do?
So the years and years and years ago, and I don't remember exactly when, and I think I'm going kind of crazy because there's one article in Reptiles from like 2006. I think it is. I have it in my room. I read it periodically to double check my information when I'm doing things. And then there was that article, and then I swear there was another one, and it may have been a different magazine. I don't remember. I don't think it was the same author, but there was articles on Bairds at the time, and they were showing off those really high, like gunmetal, silver, steel looking Bairds. And I remember at the time I was probably 15, maybe 14. And I just remember that for whatever reason, that issue, when I saw that snake, it really stuck out to me. And that was like, at the time I'd never heard of them. And so it was like, well, those are really cool looking. It's like, it's kind of like a corn, but it looks like a freaking transformer. And I don't know, it just stuck with me ever since. And then there was a point in time, probably back in maybe 2008, where I had come across one, I think on Craigslist or something. And so I had that. It was a male. I don't even know any like information as far as background or anything. It was just a decent looking Bairds. And I had that one for a little while, and then I took a break and sold off a bunch of stuff. And that was one of the animals that went. And then circa 2016, I was up at one of the Charleston shows when they were doing it at the fairgrounds, and there was a guy at a table who had some of the Mexican types.
Yeah, cool.
Quote unquote. So he had those really cheap, and I remember like when I saw those on the table, I was like, oh, that's really cool. Like I kind of got a flashback to when I had Bairds and stuff, and I was like, these it would be neat to revisit these and have them again. And so I got that pair for a really decent price. Still have that pair. And then it was just over time, I just realized how enjoyable they are as a species. Like they're really cool. They go through a crazy ontogenetic, color change and shift. And I just ended up getting more and more of them over time. And now, probably a solid third to maybe half of my collection is just Bairds alone. Of different kinds and different, I got some of the Mexican stuff. That original pair, like I said, they were sold to me as Mexicans. At the time, I wasn't terribly familiar with them when I bought them. So I, was looking at them on Google and I was like, okay, cool, I'll grab them. Looking back now, like the dad definitely fits the phenotype. And I guess we'll get into this, in a few minutes. But mom kind of doesn't. And so I've bred those two. My first clutch came from them last year after waiting for, 4 or 5 years since I got them as babies. and I call them Mexican types because, like I said, Dad sort of fits the bill, but I kind of have a feeling there's other stuff mixed in there, and Mom doesn't really sort of look the part. So I don't know. They're just kind of Bairds, and so I took the locality type thing, which we say in chondros a lot. You know, if you're not sure of the locality, but it sort of fits this phenotype that falls in line with a certain area, and it's a Biak type, or you know, it's a Mexican type or whatever. So
I like that.
Yeah. Sort of gives you an easy out if you're not sure, but it's also like full transparency. It's I don't know exactly what these are. Dad looks like he's got Mexican in him. Mom kind of, who knows, but it exists to some degree.
No, and I think that's extremely important, especially, you know, publicly advertising things of that nature. You know, too often now you see people just pushing the locality aspect of it and really just misadvertising animals. And just, you know, over the course of the past couple of years, it's interesting too. So many people inquire and say, hey, I'll show you a picture. Can you tell me what the locality of the animal is? And you're like, that's not locality.
No, that's not how this works. No. You can get close with the phenotype and where it is, but you certainly can't say definitively that it's from that space or that spot. Yeah. Ooh.
And there was actually an ad a couple months back, maybe last year, that I don't remember exactly if it were Mexican types or the Loma Altas, but they just had a picture of like one of the parents, and they're like, these are Loma Alta Bairds. And it's like, well, one of them is like, is there a reason you're not giving us the other parent to that clutch? Like, there is some with anything, you know, there's going to be some questionable things for sale and people.
So then with the Baird eye, so you pick up that initial clutch. Sorry, not initial clutch, the initial pair. You bring them home. Mm-hmm. A lot of times what will happen when people do that is you get that first fix of what you think is going to be awesome, and then you end up working with it, and you're kind of like, yeah, this isn't awesome. So for the people that are listening, and I'm not one of them, Baird eye is high on my love list for North American colubrids. Nobody knows this. I had a little Baird eye phase back in 2004. So there is that. But what about when you got them back and you know, to your house, you're raising them the months after? There had to have been something that just kind of set you off on these snakes, given that they're now literally potentially half of your collection. So what about their care, their husbandry, their behavior? Was there just something there that you liked? Was it the fact that they weren't really everybody's cup of tea? I just like exploring why people choose the animal that they decide to focus on a little bit. So
yeah, it's kind of the total package in a sense. I mean, care wise, they're pretty bulletproof. They do come in a not a huge spectrum of colors and sort of options in terms of morphs and stuff, but they're kind of the same reason I call them the North American Brettles, because I love Brettles pythons. I don't have any right now, but that's going to be one of my all-time favorite species of snake to keep no matter what. I will never not recommend Brettles. And these guys are similar. Like they're from Southwest Texas. They seem to handle pretty much anything you throw at them. They go through a really interesting color change over time from the time they're babies to adults. Demeanor wise, most of them are actually pretty mellow. Like I have a couple that are more runners than anything else, but as far as having some that are, you know, defensive or bitey, kind of like my thorn scrubs, like they're not even close to that. Like they're much more relaxed. They musk a lot. Like that's sort of their first line of things. So I've gotten used to that, but, yeah, personality-wise, like one of my that same male from the original pair, like I still have him, and he's a puppy dog. Like I could go in there and pull him out, and he's just curious and checking things out. You know, it's not a fear thing. The female is kind of a different story for some reason. She's much more high-strung and just more apt to try and get away from you as quick as possible. But I don't know. I think a lot of it too is just the fact that it's going back to the Brettles thing. It's the natural beauty of them. Like, there's no real morphs needed. There are some, and they're awesome. and there's a lot of parallels to Brettles too, I think, in that sense, because there's not a lot of morphs in Brettles either. There's not a lot of morphs in Bairds, but just as is, even if it's line bred or wild caught, which I do have a wild caught male from Chris Painchab, which is still a pretty snake. He's good looking. It's just like, you see pictures of him in the wild, and it's odd that you have an animal that is that color in the environment they're in, and just naturally like they look like this. That to me, that's kind of the cool part. Is like same reason I like my local corn snakes. May not be special to anybody else, but to me, it's just there's sort of a novelty sort of factor to it, where it's like this is just cool as is. Like it doesn't need to be anything else other than as it's presented. And I don't know, I like that. I gravitate towards that some, and especially with some of the line bred stuff though, they're incredible snakes, like color wise and everything else. They're really hard to beat for a North American rat snake.
No, I agree. I mean, on some of them, the ventral coloration can be outstanding orange and red, even just as hatchlings. Yeah. And then you mix it in with like that gunmetal silver or black and gray. And I mean, it's just a snake that just pops. And it really is an underappreciated colubrid, especially underappreciated colubrid because of the fact that they used to cost, $30?
Yeah.
And now they're non-existent. And there's many factors for that. One is the value of the animal. Obviously, people weren't pursuing it or pursuing some of the traits or selective breeding of it and also advancing it. But also, they're not huge clutches either, in terms of an animal.
I think that's one of the biggest reasons people aren't breeding them as much, because it's the fruits of the labor are much smaller than what you get with like corns and other false water cobras apparently too.
Yes. Jesus God.
Yeah.
Yeah,
but they are a bigger species in terms of like North American rat snakes. Like they are sort of on the higher, the bigger end as far as like length. They're not super girthy, but they're for a Pantherophis, to me, they're in comparison to something like a yellow rat that we have here, which are just big, like stocky rat snakes. These guys they get long, but they don't get super thick. So they're they're interesting too, just in that regard, that they're similar to all the other Pantherophis, but they're not,
Yeah.
So Justin, I mean, why colubrids? I mean, because you have a pretty diverse collection already. I mean, and if you don't mind, maybe go into some of the different species that you're keeping currently.
Yeah, I've got corns. So I've as of the last probably couple months, 9 months, whatever, I've been on a pretty serious corn kick, and it's 100% nostalgia for me. Me and my dad bred corns back in the early 2000s, and so there's just this soft spot that I've always had for corns, but I've had some here and there ever since, but I've never really committed to them on any serious level. And now it's just, I'm really enjoying them. And coming back with all the different color combos and color morphs now that didn't exist back then. It's just wild. It's nice to have to learn these things again and sort of get reacquainted with basic genetics, because never really having much in the way of morphs with anything that I've kept in the past, it was coming in and being like, how am I supposed to figure out how something that's het for 5 different things is going to work with something that's combined with, something that's het for 2 other things. And so it's nice to sort of have something to sort of re-explore again. And so there's the corns. I've got some Boiga, a pair of Cyanea, which are actually going to Terry Burwell here as soon as his building's done. I got some rhino rats, courtesy of Dr. Loafman. I've got the Diones. I've got the Bimaculata, both those, the Elafe. I got my Janseni, so my Gonyosoma Janseni, which is a passion project that currently is like just kind of plateaued. I don't know what's going on with them. And then I'm big on the green tree python, so I've got a handful of those, but for the most part, it's pretty much just corns, Bairds, old world rats and green trees. But colubrids, to me, it's I've talked about it before on our show. It's like with corns and stuff and Bairds, you don't have to worry as much when you're breeding those. It's not nearly as stressful as it can be with like chondros, where the eggs are much more delicate and you have to constantly wonder if you got things right and if they're going to go the distance. So it's nice to balance out that with something that frankly just doesn't require a ton of thought or worry. So for me, like colubrids, it's balancing that out. It's all the different color combinations, especially with corns. With the Bairds, it's what I was talking about with like the natural beauty of them. And then rhinos, I love rhinos. That was another species that was a dream as a kid, seeing it in the pro exotic ads and stuff and reptiles, and no one had them, and so it was like, man, it'd be really cool to own some of those one day, and not thinking it would ever happen. And then now there's more people breeding them than ever, and it's an awesome species that I really love. And I've got a Bairns, but I've only had that for a couple months now. So
we're in a chat together, which everybody needs to know.
Yes,
I've razzed you many a time over which one is the superior unicorn snake. So
rhinos.
Okay, we'll let that roll.
So, I was given the Barons to sort of take the Pepsi challenge.
Well, that's what I want to get into. So, has it changed anything at all, or is it just
no? It hasn't yet. But he's still very small.
Fair.
He's still little. It's too soon to call it. I think in the end, though, I will still be Team Rhinos.
Yes,
especially in terms of like other people asking me which one they should go with. It's going to depend on your experience and stuff, because I'm not going to really be very quick to recommend anything that's epistoglyphus.
Yeah.
Just because you see too many people online with Boiga that are just holding it up to their face and stuff like that, and it's not small Boiga either. It's like giant melanota and pretty large cyanea and stuff, and it's like I don't want people to see that and be like, I can do that with my Barons.
Well, I'm going to jump on your train here, because I think that people are. I just got done writing this book, so I did this deep dive into the toxins that the philodryanids have, which is the group that they belong to. And there's actually a paper just on Baroni toxins and what it does to mice. And I recommend that every keeper of Baroni read that paper. And if you want that paper, message me. I will gladly send it to you. But I can tell you that
I want that paper.
A Baroni bites a mouse and it turns it to goop with those metalloproteases pretty damn fast. And it was a little bit, I'll fully admit that it was eye-opening for me when I read the paper and saw what that snake's able to do. And anybody that's kept Baroni knows the feeding response in a comfortable Baroni is something to behold. I think that they're every bit as reactive to food as false water cobras are. And everybody talks about how falsies go completely nuts. There's actually a Baroni right up there, and I have a pair of tongs that's about 3 feet long. And it's the only snake here that I offer with those tongs, because it's at head level. So if something's going to go wrong, it's going to go really wrong. But no, definitely. So I will concede on that. I would say Baroni are a more advanced snake than people realize because of their dominance.
I don't know though. I mean, this one that I have has at no point tried to take any swings at me. It is still pretty squirmy. You pick it up and it's like doing the crazy wiggle. But it's never at any point tried to nip me, or I've never had any concerns of it trying anything. It's not food crazy yet, because I just drop feed, which I drop feed with all the Boiga too, just for the same reason. It's like they're gonna find it. I know they're gonna come out. I know they're gonna eat it. There's no reason for me to sit there and jiggle it in front of their face and try to get them to take it. So I don't know, but I have seen videos of like Dustin Gron's feeding response on his Barons, and it's like trying to eat a plastic leaf because it missed the mouse entirely and just never noticed, and like just craziness, and that's
the issue with them. I think it's not necessarily. I have worked with one that was really defensive, But I don't really see that as a species that's going to be like coming at you per se defensively.
Right.
But when they are on, they are flipping on, man. And they get food stupid and just try to grab everything and anything, like leaves with Dustin. I had one fire out and grab a eraser on a pencil in my office, and I don't know what the hell, the consistency of the eraser must have given like a prey item or something, but it like gnawed the hell out of it, and I waited for it to quit, and I got to see actually the puncture marks from the fang. This was a 6-foot adult female, like monster, but there were plenty of Duvernoy secretion left on the end of that pencil. I was kind of like, oh, there's a lot going on here. So
yeah,
but for me,
I'm team rather not find out when it comes to Boiga and all the other rear fang stuff and Thrasops, and it's, is it likely to be anything serious? Probably not, but I still don't really want to find out.
No.
I don't like, I know wasp stings hurt. Hadn't been stung by one in a long time, but I'm not going to go grab one just because it's not going to kill me. It's just, I understand why people, like, I'd love to hold my female Cyanea without a hook, and I'm fairly confident that she wouldn't do anything, but it's just like, I've also seen her get really excited over food and get really irritated with me and like decide that she doesn't want to hang out with me anymore. And I don't, I don't get the point of just waving it off. The whole rear fang thing, like I've talked about with Uzak, it's mildly venomous is such a stupid term. And it's such a broad brush and broad stroke. And it's so much more nuanced than that. And after reading that book, that venomous bites from non-venomous snakes, that gave me that's what opened my eyes to the whole thing of like rear fanged is a very, very vague term.
Yeah, it's a continuum. It's not even a
yeah.
And even, I mean, we might as well just keep rolling with this because this is a good discussion. But let's talk about everybody's favorite snoot booper, Western hogs. When you start diving into what Heterodon can do, I can flat out tell you, and there's people that are going to hear what I say and are going to think I'm crazy, but I've read all the literature on Hydrodynastes, falsies, and I've read all the literature on Heterodon, and Heterodon can hold their own with false water cobras biochemically 100%. I mean, I have yet to find an article that shows great big edema and blisters and all that kind of stuff with Hydrodynastes, like literal lesions. Nasicis, plains hognose snake, Western hognose snake, whatever you want to call it, that exists. I mean, you can go on the flipping hognose snake Facebook groups and do an image search and see what they can do. So I just think that we need to respect these things a little bit more than we do.
I mean, Brian Hayes just got nibbled on by one of his, and he documented it on his Instagram story over the course of like the 24 hours, 48 hours that it happened. And he's like, this was an eye opener. Cause I had messaged him and kind of, we had sort of joked back and forth. It's like, yeah, but it's only mildly venomous, ha ha ha. And he's like, it's not anything serious, but it's definitely not nothing.
Yes.
Yeah, like he got some swelling, he got some minor symptoms and stuff, and he's like, this really has me second guessing, a lot of rear fang stuff, not just hog noses. And it seems to me that and this is why I prefer hooks when it comes to this stuff, at least the bigger stuff. It's like I don't need to learn that lesson by experiencing it. I can see there's plenty of other people that do these things, get bit. Cyanea, a lot of Boiga get sort of written off. I think large melanota, any large Boiga is fully capable of probably giving you a bite worthy of a hospital visit. But I don't need to learn that lesson myself firsthand. It's just like you already know what the potential is there. Like I've seen people that got bit by yearling size Cyanea, and they had fairly impressive symptoms from a snake that's considered small. It's like, why, what's the point? Hooks are easy to use. Boiga especially don't like being messed with for the most part. So it's like, what are we doing? What's the point?
Yeah, and that's like the other part of the sidewind with Boiga too is, most of the people free handling some of these Boiga, they're fresh import animals that are parasitized, they're stressed, and honestly, they're not reactive at the point of which they should be. So free handling, the animal's not going to be as responsive, but you give that animal a year in captivity, deworm it, make sure it's properly hydrated, that animal's going to respond entirely different. And I say that because I've seen that. Because I've been bit by a Boiga before too as well in that response where the animal finally became hydrated, treated properly, and they can pack a punch. So...
Yeah, like I said, I think like big adults of any species in that genus is definitely something that I would fully avoid wanting to experience firsthand.
Yeah, and this was an animal that was turned into animal control, and I ended up keeping it and treating it properly, and all of a sudden I was like, "Holy cow, this behavior changed overnight."
Yeah.
So.
And it's a similar scenario with the Jansenii for me. It's like I know they don't enjoy me messing with them. Usually when they're out, it's not that enjoyable anyways. So it's like I just kind of leave them be. It's like you already know the reaction you're going to get from them. And it's just not every species wants to be taken out and messed with. Some of them thrive on literal neglect.
Yes.
And that's just the way they are. Like that's just the name of the game with that species.
As our good friend Nipper, doesn't he always say with Boiga that the best way to take care of them is with willful neglect? Or there's some specific type of neglect, which I've always liked. Yeah.
Yep.
All right. Well, bringing this back to Bairds. So why don't you talk to the different localities? Just there's going to be people that are going to listen to this. They're going to see Baird Eye and they're going to get excited. So if you're getting into Bairds, what's kind of the introductory locality deal, phenotypes or different color patterns associated with locality? Just kind of do a Bears Basics 101, if you will.
So that's going to kind of vary. What I've noticed or what I've seen in terms of locality availability is typically Loma Altas, which are, in my opinion, kind of the poster child for the species. I mean, we're talking about line-bred Loma Altas, which naturally they are very silver, and that's sort of the thing with Lomas and I think it's Highway 177, Highway 277.
Texas?
Yes, Southwest Texas. So I'll back up real quick. In their range, you typically, from what I've noticed, because I go on iNaturalist periodically, look at new sightings of Bairds. I'll save those pictures. I have folders in a Google Drive with every county, and I just save all those pictures to that county. And basically in the hopes of like compiling that at some point into, like a slideshow or something to where I can look through that and notice the variations as you go from one side to the other of the range and pick out sort of the phenotypes that you typically would get with that locality. But on the eastern side of the range, so the closer to San Antonio, like that, you're on that side. They typically seem to have a lot more orange, seem to be a lot more silvery. And then as you kind of work your way west, they start to kind of dull out a little bit, and you get some that are more of like a grayish color. They have some hay sort of yellows to them in the pattern there. You still get some of that silvery gray color. It's just not that like true silver. It's much more of a steely, like darker gunmetal kind of gray. And then as you go south into Mexico, you get the ones that have a gray head, and then usually a uniform colored body, which is like a yellowish color. You may still have some pattern in there, but that is a hallmark of the Mexican Bairds. Like I've never seen any pictures of anything in Texas that had that same look, and it's odd because in their range, there's a pretty large gap from the bottom of the range in Texas to the top of the range of the ones in Mexico. Like it's almost it's fairly separated, and they've been separated for a long time. And I think at one point they were a subspecies, but they're not anymore. So there's one bigger pocket, and it's like Nuevo Leon, I think is the area in particular. And then there's a smaller pocket underneath that one, and I don't even know off the top of my head where that one was, but those ones do look like those have that silver head with the uniform colored body, and those are considerably rarer to come across because they're from Mexico. We don't have access to them.
Yeah.
A lot of the ones in the States are from, I want to say, San Antonio Zoo or Fort Worth. Is there a zoo in Fort Worth?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
I think a lot of the ones that we have here originated from that stock initially, from however many decades ago when they got some into the country. And I'm sure there's some that came in through illegal means as well, but whatever. But those are going to be a lot less common. Those are typically going to be more expensive. And then, your Loma Altas, those are just the sort of the hallmark of the species, in my opinion, because you get the silvers at the base of all the scales. You get this just lava, like fire orange. And so as they move, that orange kind of disappears. And then it's kind of like with the rhino rats where, the pattern and the blues and whites between the scales sort of comes out as they're moving around. And they're unbelievable. I mean, they literally look like they're made of metal. And, you don't get that with a lot of the other localities, but they're all pretty. Like they all have their redeeming factors. And it's just one of those species where pictures and videos may not do them justice because you have to see it firsthand. You have to see the detail, and then it makes sense. Like I can post pictures and videos all day long, but it never seems to fully get just the finer detail in things to really help people get it.
Yeah.
Oh man, especially when like the light glistens off their scalation too. I mean, like that silver, that orange, that red, it just pops, if you will, especially as like they're moving through your hands. I mean, they're such an underappreciated species.
Yeah, and then the hypos. I mean, the hypos to me, that metal color gets replaced with what looks like pearl to me. Like it's just it pearl, marble, whatever you want to call it. It's just it's wild. I don't know how to describe it. It's just you don't see it in any other snakes.
No, and like this, the sad part with the hypos is different than other species. Is the hatchlings start out not as beautiful or luminescent as like what the adult animal will actually develop into. And as that animal starts to develop, sexually mature, I mean, it just pops. And then you got like this beautiful orange. I mean, it's amazing.
Yeah, I mean, my older male hypo, he's like bubblegum pink. Like, it's wild, And he's the one that I paired him for the first time this year. And he went to that same female that I initially got from that first pair. The who knows what type. Supposed to be Mexican, doesn't look Mexican, whatever. So that clutch, she didn't do great this year. It was a clutch of like 7, and 5 of those were not good out the gate. So the 2 eggs that are left are really healthy looking. So that'll be the first hets I produce. But yeah, I mean that's the problem with the species overall is, and I've said this a lot, is just the fact that people see them on tables as babies. And they assume that it's just a gray rat or any other kind of rat snake because as babies, they do look very generically Pantherophis. And I can understand why people would see that and be like, yeah, whatever. And it's like Owen's talked about with some of the pythons and stuff. Like, you have to bring the adults. Because when you do that, people then will understand, and it is wild because they look completely different. It's like you see them as neonates, and then you see a crazy silver orange adult, and it's like, oh, okay. And people get it.
Are there other morphs beyond hypo, or is that the primary morph?
That's the primary morph. Tim Spuckler has an anery male that, as far as I know, and as far as I think anybody knows, is the only one that exists. I think he's either producing ghosts or he's going to be. I don't know the specifics on that, but the aneries really, like, they're interesting because their eyes are just like completely black when usually they're like a coppery color, and you can see the pupil and you can see the the rest of the eye. With the aneries, it's like just two black doll's eyes, just pitch black. And that uniform gray color that you get with most of them to begin with, but then you don't have any of that orange. It's just a darker, much more uniform looking animal. I do notice with the hypos or albinos, whatever you want to call them, it's interchangeable. It's pretty much just a T positive albino. I think you do get some variation because the big male hypo I have and then the hypo I have from Matt, I don't think they're necessarily going to look the same as adults. Like his seems to be a little bit more purple. And then, the bigger one I have, he's much more of that bubblegum pink. And so I think there is variation or maybe different lines of a hypo that maybe we just don't know of that exist. But that's pretty
so
much
to go
is just angry.
So to go off that, Justin, real quick, that hypo you have from me was actually outcrossed to a wild caught animal, which actually might be partly why that animal is very different from the hobby too as well, because I think once we actually start to integrate some of these different traits too as well, we're going to actually start to see different variation, especially in the way that those genes are expressed.
Yeah, and that's something I'm very anxious to sort of play with down the line is, that Loma Alta look. That's just the silver and the orange and seeing how that would look basically as a hypo. That wild caught male that I have, breeding him into some of that stuff and seeing what comes out. It's just there's so much undiscovered country when it comes to that species that I don't know that I necessarily want it to be a thing where it's like orange and there's all of a sudden a million morphs, and I don't think it ever will be. Like I said, I think it'll always kind of be like Brettles where there's like the handful of morphs and those are cool and all. But there's just a lot of things that I've been thinking about and wanting to sort of tinker with in the coming years and seeing what happens.
So can we talk a bit about your keeping strategy with them?
It's pretty simple.
Yeah, is it as
pretty
straightforward as it appears to be? So just lay it out there.
I keep them the same way I keep my corns. So they're on aspen. They've got water bowls, multiple hides. What I do notice with them, and I think because of their range and where they come from, similar to subox, like ventilation will help them. They stuffy enclosures don't do good things for them. But it's interesting too because they spend, compared to other Pantherophis I've had in the past, like they're kind of like popwin carpets in that I have some that hang out in their water bowl all the time, and there's nothing wrong with them. I don't have mites, I don't have any of that. They just love to hang out in their water bowl, and to the point to where sometimes I'll have to, almost like with the rhinos too, like I'll have to pull them out and dump the water bowl and let them dry out for a day or two, and then put water back in there. But I've got some that, man, they love hanging out in water for some reason, which is just bizarre because where they come from, there's not a lot of that. So I don't really have an explanation for it as to why they're doing it. They don't do it after feeding, kind of like the rhinos do. Like they just like being in water. They like hanging out in their bowls. But yeah, I mean, I have my adults are in V70s. Hatchlings are in 6 quarts. Yearlings are in the V15s, the Visions, V35s. Really straightforward. I pretty much run my room ambiently at this point because of my Ackie cage. It heats up the room so much that I just turn everything off. But I've kept them without heat in the upper mid 70s. They do fine. I've kept them with a hot spot or hot end of the 85, 86 range, and they do fine. They're pretty equal opportunity when it comes to that kind of thing, which is another reason I think they're a really versatile species in terms of if your room isn't perfect and you have some dips or you have some highs, like they seem to do okay no matter what.
So you went, I know you did a trip to West Texas where these guys are native to. Did going out there help you change anything, make you realize some aspect of their biology / behavior / whatever that you could then at least have an aha moment as far as their care or why they look the way they do or anything like that?
Yeah. Well, especially sort of the Edwards County, sort of Davis Mountains area, and even like the rock cuts in the other parts of the area we were in, like especially at night. It's not terribly hot at night. It's actually fairly windy. At least it was when we were there, and so it was fairly comfortable. Seeing the cuts and seeing the landscape itself and all the other things, it makes much more sense as to why a lot of things are colored the way they are out there. Being in Lajitas and seeing, that was the one spot that they saw the pink coach whip, and it's like it doesn't make sense out of context, but in the context of these hills that have just pink rocks and stuff all over them, like it's really bizarre how many different colors there are of those rocks, and if one was curled up in there, you wouldn't notice it. Like it makes complete sense why they are the way they are, and I still don't understand why Alterna look they like the way they do, because there's nothing orange in the rock cuts out there, but whatever. But yeah, again, like I took pictures of habitat in the different areas we were in, and I definitely sort of thought of things as we were walking around and sort of like why do they do the things they do and where they're at. And it's just like Casey Cannon did with Brettles and going out to Alice Springs and seeing, taking data and seeing the habitat himself. I'm in full agreement with Eric Burke that a lot more people should do that. If you have a species that you're really into, definitely check out the habitat if you can, and go to where they're native and see it for yourself, because it'll give you a better appreciation, I think, for that species and all the other species that live in that area as well. So,
yeah, my dream is actually to go to China. Messenger told me I could come when the time comes.
He told me that too. But I was like, man, that's because of him. China's like at the top of my list. It's up there. Like it's such a cool looking place.
Yeah. Unfortunately, I got a feeling that might be off the grid for a couple of years.
No. The world today.
So, yeah. Just curious, like, talking about that, I mean, how about elaborating on Diones? I mean, I see your love for that species too as well.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, what kind of brought you into those?
The guy right beneath you on the screen there.
Hi.
Yeah.
I mean, up until he had mentioned them, I really was, I was fairly, well, not fairly, I was very unfamiliar with that and the Bimaculata. And it was actually around the time that we had Messenger on the show, and he had come out with the book and stuff like that you would help with. And I've referenced that book with these Diones and Bimaculata I don't know how many times. Just, it's one of those things you ever notice, like you go to books, and even though you've read the same like 5 pages 20 million times, you still go back to it hoping that maybe some sort of mystery sentence has appeared, and like there's some information there that maybe you would miss the other 2,000 times you had already read it.
100%.
Yeah. But yeah, I got them, and it's just another one of those species, sort of similar to the Bairds, where it's like they're different, they're interesting, they're they're very easy to care for. You have some, so you know what I'm talking about. But and when I got them from Zach, I was like, these are pretty cool, and breeding them for the first time and hatching out that first clutch a couple days ago. And then posting pictures of them, and people are like, they've never even heard of those. Just like with Bairds, people are like, I've never even heard of that before. What is it? And it's nice to put that stuff out there and familiarize people with these things, because it makes me happy that people are actually interested enough to be asking what it is, and then looking into it, and hopefully maybe they end up taking the plunge in them and trying them out. And in talking to Rob Stone, he made it sound like Diones at one point were much more popular than they are. I don't know if that's the case. Matt could probably elaborate on that some, because he's had much more time with the old world stuff than I have. And it's really surprising, because they're small, especially the Bimaculata. They're really easy to keep, like really strong feeders. Mine they're okay handleability wise. I'm sure if I spend more time with them, they would get better. And their care, like I don't have mine on heat. I've never had them on heat, even when I was running heat on the cages before the Ackies showed up, and they do fine. They really don't seem to care. And breeding them was a breeze. That male wasted no time making that happen. Seeing the process of how they hold on to the eggs longer and then they drop them and then they hatch after a month or so was different. And then just the amount of colors and patterns and stuff they come in across their range. It's like, how are these not way more popular than they are? It fits the bill for the people that are into morphs, locality stuff. Like I don't get it. I don't know if it's just because they stopped being imported at some point, or if, like so many other species, they had a big following and then it kind of just over time people got distracted by other stuff and it just kind of faded away. Is there anything to that, Matt? Timeline wise?
Yeah. So timeline wise, there was a big push in this species right before ball pythons start to take their course. And a lot of that came from European imports. Also, a number of specimens were coming in from Tula Herpetarium too as well, which is a zoo in Russia. And a lot of those animals were being imported from Cameron, from Bushmaster, and being brought into the private sector as well as the public sector. And from that, we were starting to see a lot of different locality-specific animals, but also, and still to this day, we're still seeing stuff, maybe not representative appropriately, I would say, because some of the animals that are being advertised or talked about may be actually locality crosses, which is fine. In the hobby itself, as long as you represent the animals appropriately, so be it.
I don't think the European crowd likes that very much, though.
Well, what's interesting? So
impure.
What's experience, Justin?
No, I just like knowing and seeing how hardcore. There's a Dion's group on Facebook. It's very small. It's only like 350 people, but like I've only seen a couple of posts, at least in some of the recent ones, where people were crossing localities and stuff. And I posted mine just the other day of the hatchlings, and it's like, this is a Beijing to Siberian, and I was kind of expecting to get like bricks thrown through my window or something. But I don't know. It didn't happen.
So, well, what's interesting is that's where a lot of the crosses have occurred, because the popularity in that species is immense overseas versus here in the States. And a lot of it has to do with the small size. Obviously the males only getting to be about 12 inches long, and females growing upwards of 2.5 to 3 feet, depending on the locality of the animal. But, there's so much that still can be done with that. You're seeing stuff from Sergei Royabov with some like the crazies, the different hypos, pearls. And a lot of that stuff is just locality cross animals that were found, and just kind of crossing those animals to really kind of pursue some of those different phenotypical results. And there really is a lot that can be done. But, even with the animals I have here, if worked with appropriately, they are very gentle animals. I've actually, for some of the animals I have here, I can actually feed them from my fingertips, where they don't like strike. They'll actually just come up and just gently take.
My female ain't that. She's fallen out of the tub and onto the floor chasing and attached to it. Like and then the male, that little Siberian male, I don't know if he was like that with Uzak, but he's feisty, man. He's
feisty.
I open the tub and he's just, and their strike cracks me up because it's so much like Gloidius and Echistrodon in that short just burst where like it's just like the first
it's like bam, 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 bam. Mm-hmm.
And little hiss they do when they do it too. It just, I don't know.
I found
sounds like they're hungry.
The animals that you got from me, they actually, all the colubrids I've kept, those things would musk.
Oh yeah,
at like the bat of a hat. Like if I was just gently moving them, anytime that hands went on the snake, I was getting musked. That was just the way that was going to work.
I picked up the female today. I think you saw the cloaca was open, and I'm like, I just pocketed her back down. I was like, not today. No.
I think, Justin, when I send you the rest of these Bairds, I'll throw in a Dion that is finger tame for you.
There you go.
Yeah, and that's with the clutch I had, it's 8. I went 8 for 8 on that clutch, which was cool. One of them I had to cut because all the others had pipped, and that one had not yet. And so I was like, okay, maybe this one's dead in the egg. So I cut it and did the the touch test with my cuticle scissors, and it moved. And then his little head popped out, and he ended up coming out no problem.
Sweet.
But like Chris Painchab, he's interested in them because I've been talking to him about them. So I'm going to send him a pair. Matt Morris, who's a big chondro guy, he's been interested in them. So I said I'd send him a pair, and I'll end up holding on to some myself just because I don't know exactly how old that female is. So I don't know how many more.
I can actually
seasons.
answer that question. She should be 6.
Okay.
So there you go.
So you might want to hold on to some.
Yeah. Well, I have the one that he produced from that same pair, and that's a female. So I want to hold on to some, but I also, like I was telling Chris, like I definitely need to get my hands on some others just to get more things into the gene pool and sort of change things up a bit. But they are really cool. The Bimaculata I struck out on this year. Those seem to be much more nuanced in what you need to do to get them to breed.
You have to get those a lot colder.
That's what I figured. And the issue is when I started cooling stuff down in November here, most of December was still in like the upper 60s, low 70s. It didn't actually really get cold until probably mid-January. And I cooled everything down until early February. And I was really worried the Diones didn't get cold enough to go, but that clearly wasn't an issue because they were locked up constantly after I put them together.
Yes.
The Bimaculata, I don't know. I got a slug from her. I opened the tub the other day and there was a slug just hanging out there. So I think that's the case.
We Justin got the Bimac from us as well. And I took all the pairs that we received and actually put them in our cold room at the university, which holds at about 46, 47 for 2 months. And we didn't get literally every species. I think we went 12 for 13 this year.
Wow.
And the one holdout were our Bimacs. And I just think that we got them. I mean, those animals, I received them in late October. It was late in the game. I just think they needed some time to settle in, and it was worth a shot. So give it a go next year.
Yeah, and I really think that they didn't get cold enough. With all the North American stuff, it's kind of whatever. I feel like you just cut them off food, and even if they experience a drop and it's only low 70s, upper 60s, and then they get warmed back up, like that's still enough for them to go, okay, yeah, that was a season, sweet, like let's go. But with the Bimax, it definitely seems like there's something I missed there, and I'm sure it was probably temperatures. That's why I really want to get my hands on some sort of like cooler that I can set and then not have to worry about it being 70 degrees in December and things not cooling down. Because Jake, who I co-host THP with, he's like, just start cooling stuff down in like January. And I'm like, I don't really want to do that. Like I don't want to cool things down from Thanksgiving to Valentine's Day because that gives us time to really load up on feeders. Because I cool just about everything unless it's a hatchling. And it's nice to be able to load up on food and stuff in that time and be ready for spring. But I don't know, like the Bimaculata in particular, I was really hoping I could get those to go because that's just a cool species. And the fact that they're like Diones are already small, but those Bimaculata are even smaller. And they're really cool little snakes, man. It's another one that there were some at Daytona last year, and I think they were asking like $200 or $300 a piece for them, and I was like, I don't know about that, but
yeah, I remember when they were $25 a piece.
I bought Diones. They were imported in 2004 at the All Ohio Reptile Show in Columbus, and they were $30 a piece. But they were also horribly infested with roundworms, and they lasted about 2 months. The only snake I've ever had die in my hand was actually a Diones rat snake. It was one of those guys, and it was the wildest thing ever because I picked it up to see if it was okay. It was croaked, and then 3 2-inch long roundworms came out of the snake's cloaca while it was in my hand. And I was like, okay, maybe this is what killed you. Or a contributing factor anyway. So
yeah, and I had that Siberian female that came with that trio, and I don't know what happened to her, man. She was rocking and rolling and doing fine, and I opened the tub one day and there was like a little bit of blood on the substrate that came from her mouth, and that was it. Like there was nothing else.
Yeah, no clue.
And the only thing I could think is maybe she got some sort of internal injury or scratch or something, and maybe it got septic, and who knows. But I was like, it sucked because that was a really pretty snake, and it was just one of those like what the hell kind of scenarios where it's like, well, what? Like I don't have any issues with anything else, so and I highly doubt I'm going to get crypto from Zach.
Yeah,
it's probably one of very few places that I am confident that I'm very, very, very unlikely to get any sort of pathogen from. But I don't know. It sucks, but because I was really hoping to like keep the Siberian stuff Siberian and like, but whatever. No one else. It's just like Bairds. No one else is doing anything with them. No one else seems to really care. So whatever, That's kind of the nice thing about having a species that's not super popular is you can pretty much do whatever you want and no one's going to give you shit about it.
I care. No, in all honesty, though, I mean, the tricky part when you really start to investigate on Diones and things of that nature and Bimaculata is Bimaculata really haven't been offered in the hobby for, man, I'm going to say a decade.
Well, then it's even a question of are they actually really Bimaculata because they are so genetically close to one another.
Correct.
It makes me wonder when I see some on Morph Market and stuff and even other Diones, it's like I want more Diones, but I want to make sure they are like really Diones because they are super closely related to Bimaculata. And I think maybe size may be the only real distinguishing factor between the two besides some pattern variations, but I definitely would like to pursue that genus more, especially since I'm kind of moving away from Boiga. I would like to bring back Diones and Bimaculata in a sense and help sort of get those out there again and get them as hyped up as I have with Bairds.
Heck yeah, man. We got to get you on the right movement here. Your box might be bigger than what you thought.
I need a bigger room, man. I was just talking about how I kind of miss Amazons, and one of my buddies was like, I got a pair of gardens I want to get rid of. You want them? And I'm like, dude, this is like the worst time to ask me that because I have nowhere to put them. Like, I am so strapped for space, and I'm supposed to get some more corns from Chris because we got this thing that we got planned going on, and like, I need a bigger house, or I just need to make this garage. I need to convince the wife to let me convert this because she don't want things in our room, but at the rate we're going to be having some things in our room. My half of the closet, at least.
Dione space.
Yeah. You're still muted, Zach.
Yeah, no.
And I'm back.
Rookie. This is amateur hour.
Rookie mistake.
It really would be exciting to see Diones really populate the environment in herpetoculture, especially because from my perspective, and Justin, Zach, you guys might agree with this or not, but I think they make a better colubrid than corn snakes.
I agree with that.
Yeah, especially a male, per se, a first-time snake, an only snake in a home. Small size, room temperature animal, no heat required.
Well, also with their range as big as it is, like if you ended up getting some locality specific stuff, like they'd be a really good candidate for a naturalistic setup, sort of mimicking that. And I've seen some. I have a couple papers online that I referenced a ton when I was breeding as well, and they were from I think people overseas in Europe. And there were some pictures of some setups that people had done where there's like some pine needles, and it looks like that pine forest that you would see in China and like in the Beijing area and stuff like that. And it'd be really interesting to have a natural setup for those. And I want to do the same thing with Bairds. Like I took pictures of the rock cuts when we were looking just so I could get some sort of idea if I ever do set up a naturalistic setup and I want to recreate that. Diones, that would be a blast. That would be such a fun species to do that with, especially considering that their habitat looks so much like what we have here. I think people assume China is some sort of exotic tropical jungle area, but talking to Messenger, he's like, really, the climate's very, very similar to North Carolina. The habitat itself is very similar to North Carolina. There's really not a huge difference. It's not what people think it is. And having all the stuff we have here, like magnolia leaves and magnolia trees and pines and pine cones and all, like, you could recreate something and make it look really cool, I think. And they'd use it. They love it. They're super active. Like mine are out and about all the time, especially my female. I open the tub and she's curious enough. She'll come out and kind of look at me, and she's obviously looking for food because she's a mooch, but they're just.
I had them set up when I had them in 4x2x2s, PVCs with cork tubes and cork flats and all that kind of stuff. And they were crepuscular. So like as soon as the lights came on, there'd be a flurry of activity, then not much activity in the middle of the day. And then they kind of would pick up with the timer schedule. Like, oh, it's about an hour before the lights are coming out. And then they would be out cruising. And then the hour after dark, they were moving. But they were a lot of fun. The only reason why they left is they left with the great old world exodus of 2021. Because there's something about the juju in this house that I can't breed an old world rat snake to save my life here.
It's an Indian burial ground or something. You're cursed.
Yes. I can breed South American and North American stuff like it's going out of business, but something was just weird with them. It was stressing me the hell out. So, anyway, but no, I agree 100% that I do think that Diones are. I think they're even a really good snake to introduce people to just herpetoculture and breeding, because you don't have that
you're not
60, 70, 90 day.
And you're not going to get overloaded with babies
eggs.
Either. You're not talking about a clutch of 20 snakes. You're talking about, right. I think I got a clutch of 8, and even that sounded like it was kind of on the higher end for that species, so.
Yeah, I mean, I've had clutches of 2 or 3. I mean, it really depends on the locality, the age of the animal. But, man, they're such a cool animal. But here's my question to you, Justin. Did the eggs turn clear before they hatch?
Which I was like, everyone, man. I read that, and like you had mentioned it, and I was like, oh, okay, this will be cool. Like, one of them had kind of a window straight out the gate anyways, so that was like, that doesn't count. But no, I mean, they all did start denting a few days beforehand, and I didn't get any of the clearing up, though. But it's so strange, though, because when I candled them, it almost looks like there's nothing in there. Like, you see the veins and stuff, but you don't, and then they pop out, and it's like a fully developed fat little snake. And I'm like, where the hell were you hiding in there? Like, I have an egg candler that's pretty damn bright, and I see tons of veins, but I didn't see any signs of like an actual animal in there. It was bizarre. But
yeah, no, I know exactly what you're talking about, because I've tried to do the same with that species, and you're like, something ain't right here.
Like, they're definitely good. Or there's life happening in there, but it's just the lights are on, but no one's home.
Yeah. Well, it's interesting. I don't think we've ever gone down this conversation with Stone, but probably the last of those imports that came in the early 2000s from Russia, actually, Stone actually sold them to me.
Oh, okay.
And it was very interesting because a lot of those animals, too, were locality crossed. They all came with all these different morph names and all this stuff. And Rob and I would go back and forth, and I was like, I don't really know what this is. This animal looks way different than what it should be. That's why it kind of comes back full circle of, as long as you're publicly providing that information, I don't see a problem with it.
Yeah, and that's sort of the frustrating part with that is just, if you're selling them to other people, it's like hoping that they also, if they end up moving those animals, they're carrying that on as well. And this is how many times do some animals go through different collections and stuff, and it's like, how many times have the lines of communication been crossed? And same issue with chondros, I think, that get imported and stuff. It's like, that's a pretty general area that those animals are coming from. You know, it's how many times are those lines going to get mixed up?
Yeah, I mean, and a lot of that too is when you really think about it, you know, it comes into a fact of like how long, you know, do we have these animals in herpetoculture, and really, you know, we have to cherish it, right? You know, and that comes to the fact of keeping lines pure, you know, to the best of our capability, but also even providing pure information off of that. Because even if someone, you know, is interested in a really cool looking animal, you know, we want to make sure at least they know what it actually is, which is cool. It's fine, you know. I mean, you know as well as I do. I mean, I had some of those.
Yeah, that's what I was going to say. Like that's you see, I anytime I see those online now for sale, I think of you because I'm like, I'll bet you Matt will send me a message saying, you know, these are not what they're being advertised as, and it's not necessarily the person selling them or people selling them. They just may not know. You know, it's so much. So much going on there in that group, and I think it's the same with Dion's to a degree, or would be if they were more popular. Where, you know, you get the bimaculata intergrades and stuff like that, and localities because their range is so big. You know, I can see where it would be very easy for something to get mislabeled, switching collections. You know, going from one person to another. So it is that transparency and making sure it's known that they are what they are. For the, you know, whoever takes them home.
No, and that's, you know, the subset of this is just being honest. You and I have talked about this. Our group, if you will, our Ganyo and Phil group. You know, we continue to talk about how we preserve the hobby, how do we represent it appropriately, and I think that's the coolest part of it. So, Justin, what are kind of your future goals within the hobby, and how do you see your collection growing?
I don't know. So I think it's one of those things where the older you get, you don't feel the need to sort of keep up with things as much as you used to. I think that's sort of what goes on with ball pythons. You know, there's like the constant sort of morph chase, and I know that's not the majority of people doing balls is trying to keep up with what the latest and greatest, but I think as you get older, you kind of find it's very similar with cigars. You know, you get guys that like smoked a ton of different stuff when they were younger, and then they found that one cigar and or you know, this handful of cigars, and that's what they just stuck with. Like same with wine. You know, you find that one you like. That's what you like. You stick with that. You don't deviate from it. It's just that's what your thing. And I think it's very similar with reptiles and stuff over time. Is you find the things you really, really enjoy keeping, and I think even maybe on a subconscious level, you end up gravitating more towards those. You know, the corns for me, like, sure, you know, people might consider them like a beginner animal or whatever, but it's like I don't care. Like, they're just enjoyable. They're fun. The rhinos, you know, I love those snakes. Like that's a species. I have not enjoyed keeping a species as much as I've enjoyed rhinos. And it's just because like they're always out. Like my wife loves the rhinos. Like my child loves the rhinos.
I know. I love seeing the pictures whenever you post them, or like we talk about it. It's
just funny because there's one male of the reverse trio of older animals that I have, and they're always out. Like they're always hanging out. They have these branches that they just chill out on all day. When I'm in the room, you know, they're up against the glass cruising. Like I can open the door and reach in and just pull them out, and they're not like scared. They seem genuinely curious of what's going on. It's such a fun species, man. And so like stuff like that, like I like the otter stuff that maybe isn't as popular, like the Dion's, like the bimaculata, like the Bairds. And it's not like sort of a hipstery thing of like, well, you know, no one knows how cool these are, but I do. And it's just one of those things where it's like you keep them, and you get them cheaper because no one's buying them, so it's like more for me. But then it's just it's something different. It's not sort of your everyday animal that you see in collections and stuff like that. And it's cool to be able to produce more of them and bring them to the hobby. that's kind of my goal with the podcast and stuff in general, is just, helping to make the hobby better than it was the day before, and introducing people to species that maybe they wouldn't have seen or heard of anywhere else. Getting more species out there, and I don't know. Chondros are always going to have a special place in my heart too. Like, I'll never not have chondros, I don't think. But as far as other Morelia and stuff, I don't really have much of a desire to keep any of that anymore. But it's just one of those things where you just find, the stuff you really, really enjoy keeping, and I think you just kind of expand upon that. And if people end up, if Diones end up taking it off again, and like, awesome, like, they're really cool snakes. I'm glad to see people are interested in those, and Bairds and the other stuff, and it's just. It's nice. And breeding wise too now, like, I'm at a point where I'm okay with not really selling stuff. Like, Chris messages me and says, "Hey, I really like Diones." And I'll be like, "I'll send you a pair." Matt Morris did that. He's been looking for Diones and he couldn't find any. So I was like, "I'll send you some." It takes the pressure off when you're not like pressured to get stuff sold and gone. I just like sort of spreading the love, getting cool snakes into people that I know will truly enjoy them. Same with Bairds. I got a handful of friends now that they've started keeping them and they love them. And it's like, you need a female het? I got you. It's just, I don't know. I like being the Oprah and just being like, you get a Bairds and you get a Bairds and you get a Diones and you get a Diones. And it's just like, I don't know. When you don't really do it with the focus of like, I gotta make X amount of dollars on this snake, and I think if you do it in the way that I'm kind of sort of looking at it now, I think all other things will fall into place. And a lot of it too is paying it forward. Zach has done so much for me in terms of what I have in my collection now, that I feel a responsibility, and like, I want to pay it forward and do the same thing for someone else that, maybe wants to get into Bairds. They don't have any access to them, or, maybe they're looking for something specific. It's like, I like helping people out in that regard.
Yeah, no, I agree with you. Within my collection, I mean, obviously I have the Asian rats, but I have the corn snakes, the Bairds, a few odds and ends of different aspects of it. But part of the reason why I keep corn snakes is because I give away a bunch of them. And I give away a bunch of them to kids that might be interested in a first-time animal, and it really, it kind of plays it forward. It brings forth a trend, if you will, or someone that might be looking into the hobby and trying to figure it out. And, we as a collective group, as hobbyists, we need to make sure that we're looking at the future of this group, and how we really actually look at legislation, look at the future of the keeper, because if the keeper is no longer interested as an 8-year-old, right? If they can't afford a snake to get into the hobby, how does that help with the preservation of the hobby? And also, I would say this too, from a monetary standpoint too, you could have a $4,000 ball python, but that 8-year-old kid that comes by your table and wants to look at it and you shun him, how does that make that child look at the future of this hobby and want to pursue this as not only a keeping, but also the relative hobby of itself, of pursuing it long term? I mean, because yourself, myself, Zach, I mean, we've been doing this since we were kids. And I mean, I don't want to go down a long rant of this, but I mean, we really do have to think about the preservation, going forward on this, because legislation is changing daily, weekly. And if we're not satisfying, the interests of the community, we could lose our rights here too as well.
Well, then even sort of on the level of herpetoculture, and like, we see species disappearing all the time, because the interest just disappears, or there's not enough people sort of getting them out there in front of people and saying like, hey, these are really cool, you should really consider these. that's why, like, with the Diones, with the Jansenii, if I ever actually produce any, it's like I want to see those species grow in the hobby, especially Jansenii. I would love to see more captive bred Jansenii be out there, like, until we really sort of hammer down and figure out what exactly it is that we need to be doing to make that happen and get incubation down, a little better. Like, I know people that I would send Jansenii and be like, I know you're going to be successful with these. I want you to help get the species out there more and, like, really sort of build them up in herpetoculture. And it's the same with Diones. They're easy enough. If I have someone that's genuinely interested in them, like Matt Morris, who in my opinion is like a chondro legend, he helped out with the chondro issue of the magazine. We were doing that immensely. And so, of course, when he was like, what do you, you got Diones, what are you doing with them? You going to produce any? And when I hatched some, or we had talked about it prior, I was like, I'll send you a pair. Like, you've done a lot for me. And so I want to pay that back. And I know he has a genuine interest in the species. And so it's like, instead of hoarding them all and putting them all at $300 a piece or whatever, and instead I'd rather send those to people that I know are going to take them and run with it, and do more with that species and sort of repeat that year to year until we do have more of them available and there are more people that are aware of them and that kind of thing. So I don't know. It's just, I like hooking people up. Like, I genuinely enjoy, because Zach did it for me, He's like, hey, I know you like rhinos. I got some. You want them? It's like, absolutely. Like, you're making a childhood dream come true. It's like someone else is interested in something, especially if it's like a really good friend of mine. It's like, absolutely, I'm going to send you these, because I know that you're going to enjoy them just as much. They're really cool species, and there's a genuine appreciation there.
Yeah. Well, and, working with the Bairds and stuff like that, I mean, one of the coolest things I find is actually communal projects, if you will. And the reason why is not only are you able to expand the collective group, the knowledge, the talking about a species, but within your own collection, sometimes your collection outgrows itself, right? And sometimes you're not able to keep everything you once were. And off of that, the coolest part that I have found off of it is the friendships that you grow. You look at our messenger, our inner circle group, if you will, that I call it. It's so cool to have those kind of open conversations, because without those, where do you really grow as a community? And that's what makes it fun for me personally.
Well, it's a rising tide lifts all ships kind of thing. I look at it from the standpoint of Clastolepis. There's not a lot of guys keeping Clastolepis. Like, if I were breeding Clastolepis and I hatch some, I don't think I would be inclined to try and get them sold and get a ton of money for them. I would go and find the guys that I know have been trying to produce them, like Andy Middleton. Scott Borden had some. I don't know if he still does or not. Like, and saying, like, I want to send you some because I want to help get more of this species in more people's hands, but I have to start with people that I know are serious about them and want to do that too. And I think it's a similar scenario with something like the Jansenii and just the stuff that just not a lot of people are doing, but there is, it might be a small interest, but there is an interest. And so it's like, you send it to those people that are gonna take that ball and run with it and help build that. Like, I would rather do that than try and fill my bank account, and take advantage of that scenario.
I agree. I mean, even taking into account some species that I've worked with, the red and black striped snakes, right? I have sold some of them, but part of that was just to offset my initial investment on the animals. But after that, everything else has been here. And a lot of that, some of those animals have been given to a few zoological institutions. But other than that, it's one of those aspects where those animals could disappear tomorrow, especially with the new importation laws coming into play.
Yeah, and those kind of strike me as like a rough-scale python situation where it's like there's nothing really difficult about them, like in terms of care and stuff, right? Like, they're pretty straightforward. Breeding seems pretty straightforward. but no one has them.
You know,
so it's like
just,
once you get them in the hands of other people that start breeding them, like now all of a sudden we have people producing rough scale pythons on the biggest scale we've ever seen, and it's only getting bigger. So to me, it strikes that the striped the Bothothalmus, is that what they are? Yeah. It seems like a similar scenario with those, but I've never kept them and bred them, so I don't know. But
soon, my friend, soon.
They seem pretty easy. Like, I don't know. Like, I don't know if it makes any sense what I'm saying, but like rough scale pythons, you see them and it's like nobody has them. So people, I think, maybe get under the impression that there's something difficult about them in terms of like care and breeding. And it's like, there really isn't. Just no one has them. The availability just isn't there. But
the red and blacks right now is just the difficulty of wild caughts, you know, because that's with any species, right? That's kind of the hurdle, if you will. Once we establish a collective captive breeding program for them, I mean, that helps tremendously. But the mortality rate for the wild caughts is just the tricky part of it. Something we've talked about and we can reference to as well, that podcast I did with you and Phil too as well, because we kind of went over that. I mean, that's a big part of it. So Justin, kind of to pursue this, so you've seen the hobby take multiple different waves over the years. How do you see it changing in the future? And how do you see your face being involved in the hobby going forward?
It does appear to me that we're in sort of a renaissance of sorts where people are kind of seeing that there's more stuff out there than just sort of the bread and butter of the hobby, and people are getting interested in it and pursuing it. You know, like there's more people now interested, I think, in sort of maybe just in carpets in particular as an example, but like people are much more interested in locality stuff and wild type animals, especially like with Popwins and stuff, where we can still get new blood in instead of the morphs. Like the morphs in carpets don't seem to be as popular as they once were. I could be completely wrong on that because that's just not a corner of the hobby I really pay attention to. But just in talking to other people, you know, friends that are keeping carpets, like their interest is they like this. I have some that really like the striped stuff, but then they also love a wild type Popwin, especially if it's got, you know, a lot of that orange and is a really, really nice looking animals. So I think we're kind of getting to a point where people are starting to sort of see the other things in the hobby and starting to explore and try different things out. And I think it also seems to be the American sort of model of herpetoculture of more racks, more animals seems to be kind of shifting. And it seems like people are now starting to take a turn into less animals, like small, like the European model, as I call it, you know, smaller collections, but their setups are much more decked out and much more nuanced to that species in particular. I kind of ride the fence on that a little bit. I think if the species calls for it, like the Jance and I need something that isn't a rack, that's what I'm going to do for them. But if it's something like a corn or something else that I know is just going to do fine and not really going to care, then it's like I'm going to roll with the rack. You know, there's no right or wrong way with that. I think it just, you have to do what the recipe calls for. In terms of me and my face, I don't know. I mean, I don't want to be like a YouTube guy. You know, I don't want to be a snake discovery. You know, they do really good stuff. There's a lot of not great things out there on YouTube, but snake discovery, you know, for a while I was kind of like, I don't know, but they do good stuff in comparison. Like their content is good, and it's good for people that are kind of getting into the hobby. And for me, and it's something I've been thinking about a little bit lately, actually, is like, I think the niche that Jake and I and the THN guys fill is kind of like, I don't know that we're necessarily catered to people that are like new to the hobby. I think like our group that we sort of attach ourselves to is guys like yourself and, you know, all the people we talk to where they're in the hobby. They're not really into the morph craze or anything like that. You know, it's they're just guys that like the hobby and they're interested in interesting species. I think is kind of where we've fallen, and I'm okay with that. Like that's our people. You know, that's how we are, and so I think that's sort of the audience that we've sort of fallen into. And it's not a numbers thing. You know, there's a lot of podcasts out there now, and you know, we do what we do, and if people like it, they like it. If not, whatever, no big deal. Like, it is what it is. We're just putting out content and trying to, like I said, make the hobby better than it was yesterday or last week, and just having interesting conversations with interesting people and getting it out there. But I don't know that I necessarily want to be a face.
No, I think that. Well, I think we're all recognized for some aspect of it, right? So whether it's voice, face, personality, contributions, you know, and that's actually something I think people should be proud of in some aspects, you know, especially if you're leaving a positive aspect going forward.
I look at it a lot like music. You know, you have, I'm trying to think of a good example. You know, you have your bigger, more popular music sort of artists that have massive followings and stuff like that. And then you have the bands that aren't like that, but their following is very hardcore and dedicated. And, you know, it's like neither of those are bad. They're different. You know, that's what it is. Like, I don't think we'll ever be as big as, you know, Nerd or Barcheck or anything like that. And like, that's okay. Like that's not really the goal. You know, like they have their thing and their following. And if we have people that find us that there's, you know, some crossover there too, like awesome. But it's definitely not trying to be the biggest and most popular or anything like that. It's just, I'm a firm believer of putting things out and putting out good information to the best of our ability and doing good things for people. And I think everything else just follows, you know, falls into place after that.
No, I agree. And I think that's actually a good target to end on this segment. You know, just to leave it in a positive place, especially for this. So Justin, if people want to get a hold of you, how should they get a hold of you?
I'm more active on Instagram than anything else. It's Palmetto Coast Exotics. And we do have a YouTube channel, which is the Herpetoculture Network. So that's where we post a lot of the episodes. Periodically, we do like actual videos. We just did a collection tour of Jake's stuff. I think this upcoming weekend, I'll probably start filming some of my stuff because I don't think we've ever done a collection tour of mine. And I'll have the house to myself for the weekend, so I'll have plenty of time and focus to do that. And the Herpetoculture Network is where all the podcasts are. You can find us, you know, iTunes, Spotify, Amazon podcasts, Audible. For whatever reason, like Audible has podcasts on it. I don't know why. Google, YouTube, like I said, Facebook, Instagram, all that good stuff. So pretty easy to get a hold of and pretty responsive.
Right on. Well, for those that really haven't been hearing Zach in the background, Zach lost power to his house about 25 minutes ago. So Zach is no longer on this call. But if you wanted to reach out to Zach, he's on both Facebook and Instagram, and he's still looking for graduate students too as well. So I'll give him that plug because I'm sure he would want that made. And myself, you can find me on Instagram and on Facebook with Sarpamitra. And thanks again for listening, and we look forward to presenting another episode here.
One of the best podcasts. It's one of my favorites, personal favorites. I don't think I've missed an episode, man. And I don't usually have a whole lot of time to listen to podcasts, but like when y'all drop a new one, man, I'm all about it. Like I'm listening ASAP.
Oh man, thanks again. Really appreciate it.